You know, the Americans have the Monroe Doctrine. I don't know what you know about the Monroe Doctrine, but the Monroe Doctrine basically says the Western Hemisphere is our backyard. And no distant great power, which means no great power from Europe or from Asia, is allowed to put military forces in the Western Hemisphere. No great power from Europe or Asia is allowed to form a military alliance with another country in the Western Hemisphere. Because from the American perspective, it's intolerable to have a distant great power on our doorstep. Well, the same basic logic applies to the Russians and to the Chinese, by the way. From a Russian perspective, the idea that you're going to have NATO right on your doorstep, and NATO is bringing in more and more countries that are part of this alliance, is going to be unacceptable to them. The Russians couldn't stop NATO from expanding in '99. They couldn't stop it in 2004 because they were too weak. And you know what happens as a good realist when you're weak in international politics. Other great powers take advantage of you. This is what happened to China in the late 1840s to the late 1940s. The Chinese refer to this as their century of national humiliation. When you're weak, other great powers take advantage of you. This is exactly what the Americans did with the Russians. Russia was weak after the Soviet Union broke apart in 1991, and we took advantage of the Russians. We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in '99, we shoved it down their throat in 2004, and we decided we were going to shove it down their throat again after 2008, because we thought they were too weak to prevent it, right? But the fact is, the Russians viewed this eventually as an existential threat. The idea of Ukraine in NATO was the brightest of all red lines for the Russians. And you see what is happening now. And if you think about the Monroe Doctrine, you should not be surprised how the Russians are reacting to what's going on in Ukraine.